Hi, good morning. Welcome to the Business Expert Series with views and opinions on topical issues facing business owners right now. Today, we are with Jill Blofield from Springreach Training and Coaching. How are you doing, Jill?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really well, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you could start us off by telling us a little bit about who you are, what it is that you do, and how long you've been doing it for, please.
Okay. Well, I'm an accountant specialising in small business support. I've done accountancy of various sorts ever since school. Some of it has been in practice. In fact, the majority has been in practice, either working for other firms of accountants or being self-employed as an accountant, which I've been since 2008. And I also had 7 years in the shipping industry doing shipping disbursements, and I've had a few part-time in-house management accounts roles. So basically I've seen it from both sides. I've done the accountancy as in accounts to revenue and customs or company's house, but I've also worked within businesses and seen it from the other side as well, where you're dealing with the bank and cash flow and budgeting type stuff. So yeah. 35 years experience, yes, plenty.
Excellent, thank you for that. So in terms of that experience and obviously looking at people's businesses accounts, what do you see are the most common mistakes or challenges that business owners make and have when it comes to finances?
There's a number. I mean, obviously my specialism is right at the very small end of the field, many of whom are self-employed, so they may not even have their own limited company, so it's just them trading as themselves. One of the biggest mistakes for sort of business startups is not having a separate business bank account. So trying to run everything through the one account with all their personal stuff as well. And at the end of the day, when you're preparing your business records, you've got to account for everything that goes through the bank. So you're making your bookkeeper's life more difficult, or yours if you're doing your own bookkeeping, if you're running everything through the same account. If you have a separate account for your business transactions, it's going to make your bookkeeping a lot more straightforward. And again, with the sort of self-employed people, so people who are under self-assessment, not saving enough for their tax. There's a gap generally of anything between 10 and, I don't know, 22 months between earning the money and actually paying the tax to HMRC when you first start out. And then once your tax liability gets to £1,000 a year, revenue want you to make payments on account. And the first year you do that is a real shock to the system, because you're effectively having to pay 2 years in one. So yeah. My advice would be to put a little money to the one side right from the beginning, and just think of it, right, that's not my money, that's revenues. I haven't got to pay them yet. I can stick it somewhere I'm earning interest on it, but it's not my money.
Avoid nasty surprises. Yeah.
Avoid nasty surprises. Yeah. Budgeting is another one for sort of business startups, and if you're working in the service industry and working from home, that's all well and good, and probably you haven't got too many overheads. But if you're starting out in a business that's going to involve renting business premises, it's really important that you get your budgeting right, because I've known people who, you know, all they ever wanted to do was open up a tea shop, let's say, and they've done all their costings but been a little bit generous on their income and maybe missed out 1 or 2 costs, and then all of a sudden they realize they're tied into a 5-year period with the landlord and they can't make ends meet.
Yeah, definitely a good sort of advice to think about the budgets and the forecasting.
Yeah.
Some really interesting points that you raised there, especially for those small businesses. Thank you for that. Valuable advice. So in terms of through your eyes as an accountant, what do you think is most likely to affect economy over the coming year, as far as you can sort of see it and the people that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I tend to stay out of politics in many ways, but I think, you know, financial struggles are going to be a big thing over the coming years. You've got COVID support grants, which were shoring people up for a while, and yes, okay, so there were some people who lost out, of course there were, but there were also some people who did reasonably well, even legitimately, out of the COVID support, and that's now gone. Then you've got sort of permanent post-COVID changes to people's businesses, either, you know, footfall has fallen, or people's buying habits have changed, or maybe you've got redundant office space because all your employees now want to work from home, but you're still left with that cost in your business. Rising interest rates, rising you know, energy costs, and rising costs of complying with all the various legislation as well. So I think, yeah, finance and keeping an eye on bottom line is going to be pretty key over the coming years.
Yes, there's kind of a competing aspect coming through from the Bank of England about people not spending as much and raising interest rates, and companies not putting up prices, and it'd be interesting to see how it all goes. But yeah, ultimately it's about yeah, that cash forecast and budgeting accordingly, isn't it, for different outcomes, and I suppose competing on your own terms as opposed to anybody else's. Thank you for that share. Good share and good knowledge in there, and good sort of insight for the next year. So moving on to yourself as a business owner, and drawing on that vast experience that you have, what would you say is the biggest lesson that you have to date learned over those years? If there's one you can pick out.
Yeah, I mean,
there's 2 or 3 kind of pop out, so that's fine.
Yeah, no, there are several, but I think the biggest one for me personally has been the power of no. And it doesn't matter how much you want to help people, if there's only one of you, there's only so much you can do. And, you know, taking on staff, taking on business premises, everybody has a different attitude towards risk, and for some people that is too big a step. So when there's only one of you, it can be really, you can find yourself really vulnerable to what they call mission creep. So you'll go into an organization and you'll agree that you're going to do X, Y, and Z, and before you know it, it'll be, oh, can you just do this? Can you just do that? And the scope of what you're doing increases. Or their business, in some cases, I've had their business do phenomenally well, and suddenly what used to take like 7 hours is suddenly taking 12 hours a week, or more time than you actually have available to give to the client. And then you have to make the choice, well, okay, it's not that I can't do this, but I can't do it justice in the time that I have. Therefore, actually, it is better for me to step away so that you can find somebody who's got the time that you need to do the job well.
Set your parameters.
Yeah, so obviously, you know, as an accountant, there's a letter of engagement in place. And so, yeah, just keep an eye on what you've agreed to do. And if your client is asking you to do more or work extra hours over what you agreed, then don't be afraid to renegotiate. And if renegotiating doesn't work, then you might unfortunately have to step away, but obviously, you know, making it as painless for the client as possible.
Chair, thank you very much for that very valuable lesson. So in terms of inspiration for what you do, your friends, family, the people that you work with, helping people comes out pretty predominantly, because I think anyone in business or work in life, you're ultimately there to help people either with a product or a service. And what is it that inspires you to do what you do?
In a perfect world, I would have trained as a teacher rather than an accountant, and in many ways that still stands. So yes, I've come to enjoy bookkeeping and accountancy, but what I get the most out of is the mentoring and training side. So for me, you know, I live for the light bulb moments when, you know, somebody who didn't understand something, you can explain it in a way that suddenly they do understand, or they come to you saying, well, I couldn't possibly do that. I can't do it. I can't do that. I don't know how to use computers. I can't do spreadsheets, can't do accounts. And then they find that they can. So for me, that's the real motivating factor. And I attended an online summit December 2020. It was an international one held online. And one of my biggest takeaways from that event was the fact that I can help far more people if I put my resources online than I could ever hope to help one-to-one. Yeah, so that's now, you know, where I'm sort of devoting my energy. Obviously I do still have a client list that I deal with on a compliance basis, getting accounts and tax returns done, but any time that I have spare, I'm then putting towards developing courses, which hopefully people will find useful, aimed at self-employed and small businesses, which obviously is where my area of specialism is. Values and beliefs, I guess, is another motivating factor, wanting to make a difference, and comes from my own love of learning, because I think I saw on your LinkedIn earlier this week about somebody saying, you never stop learning. You don't.
That's definitely true. Every day is like a school day.
Yeah, so that also sort of inspires me, that I love learning and sharing my knowledge.
Fantastic. Good inspiration there. Thank you very much for sharing that. So, sort of leading on from that, what sort of impact would you like, or do you aim to have, or you want to have on the business community that you operate?
My aim is to help people to help themselves, if that's what's right for them. Now, obviously, there are some people that bookkeeping just isn't their thing. And they're just better off getting somebody else to do it. But there might be people out there who are like, well, yeah, I could do this myself, but I don't know where to start. And so my aim is to put resources out there for sort of self-employed people, also small businesses as well, that will help them to manage as much of their own bookkeeping and possibly tax themselves. I mean, obviously there are pros and cons to not using an accountant, but putting the resources out there so that people can decide for themselves, well, is this for me, or do I need help? We've also got Making Tax Digital on the way. Now it's obviously been postponed twice already, currently due to come in April 2026. But that's going to be a big change for the self-assessment tax system, because instead of people just sending in a tax return once a year, they're going to have to send their accounting figures to HMRC once a quarter, and then do a 5th submission, confirming that the previous 4 were correct and adding in any other income. So people are going to have to either be brave enough to do that themselves, or their accountancy fees are going to go up, because the accountants can't deal with people 4 times a year rather than once for the same money. My aim is to put the resources out that will help people to cope with Making Tax Digital, the first 4 submissions themselves, so that they only then have to go to an accountant, or can choose to go to an accountant for the 5th end of year summary.
That's it.
Yeah.
Where can we go to find out more information around that?
Okay, my website is it's in the process of being redone, but it is www.springreach.co.uk. I'm also on LinkedIn, Jill Blofield, and Twitter as well. Very small presence on Facebook and Instagram, but I don't use those too much for business, I have to say.
Great stuff. Jill, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences, and I wish you all the best for the future.
Thanks ever so much. Thank you, Mike.